The massive alien ships appeared without warning above Earth's major cities. Their hulls were made of some kind of crystal that caught the sunlight and scattered it into 1,000 colors. Beautiful, perhaps, but terrifying. Each ship was larger than any building humanity had ever constructed. There were hundreds of them, blocking out the sun and casting long shadows across the planet below. Ambassador Hyun stood on the observation deck of Sentinel-7, Earth's largest orbital station, watching the alien fleet with steady eyes. She was a small woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing the simple blue uniform of the United Terran Diplomatic Corps. Behind her stood Commander Dae-hyun, a tall man with broad shoulders and scars on his face from the Mars Rebellion 20 years ago. Next to him was Dr. Minji, a young scientist who looked nervous but determined. The communication system crackled to life. A voice came through, translated by their computers into something humans could understand. It sounded like grinding metal mixed with wind chimes. Humans of Earth, I am Supreme Overlord Kethris of the Valix Dominion. You will listen and you will obey. Hyun took a deep breath and stepped forward to the communication panel. This is Ambassador Hyun representing the United Terran Council. We are listening. Your listening is irrelevant. Your obedience is required. The alien's voice was cold and matter-of-fact, like someone reading a grocery list. The Valix Dominion has conquered 43 worlds. Your planet is now the 44th. You have 7 days to surrender all military assets, dismantle your weapons, and prepare your population for integration into our empire. Resistance will result in extinction. Compliance will result in survival as a client species. You will serve us or you will die. There are no other options. Dae-hyun's jaw tightened, his hand instinctively moving toward where his sidearm would normally be. Hyun placed a gentle hand on his arm, keeping her eyes on the viewing screen. A holographic image had appeared showing the Valix commander. He was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that seemed to be made of the same crystal as his ships. His eyes were pure black, without any white or color. Supreme Overlord Kethris, Hyun said carefully. Surely there is room for negotiation. We are a peaceful species, but we are also a sovereign one. Perhaps we could discuss trade agreements, cultural exchange. You misunderstand your position, Kethris interrupted. You are not negotiating partners. You are property awaiting collection. I have shown you mercy by offering survival. Do not mistake mercy for weakness. 7 days, that is all. The communication cut off abruptly. The 3 humans stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Dae-hyun spoke, his voice low and angry. We need to mobilize the fleet. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. Dr. Minji shook her head, pulling up data on her tablet. Commander, I've been analyzing their ship signatures. Their shields operate on a frequency we've never seen before. Our weapons would be like throwing rocks at a tank. We'd last maybe 3 hours in a direct fight. Then we last 3 hours fighting instead of a lifetime kneeling. Dae-hyun growled. Hyun turned away from the window, her expression calm but her eyes fierce. We need to convene the council, immediately. 6 hours later, the United Terran Council gathered in an underground bunker beneath what used to be Seoul. The room was circular, with representatives from every major nation and colony sitting around a central holographic display. President Ji-won sat at the head, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and strong hands that gripped the armrests of her chair. The situation is clear, she began without preamble. We have been given an ultimatum by a force we cannot defeat through conventional means. General Sang-hoon, what are our military options? The general stood, an old soldier with white hair and a chest full of medals from conflicts that now seemed small and petty. Madam President, I will be blunt. We have no good military options. Our fleet consists of 300 ships. They have twice that number, and each of their vessels outguns our best dreadnought by a factor of 10. If we fight, we die. If we surrender, we lose everything that makes us human, Counselor Hana added. She was young, barely 30, representing the civilian population. My constituents did not survive the climate wars, the Mars Rebellion, and the lunar famine just to become slaves to aliens. Better a living slave than a dead free man, another counselor argued. No, said a quiet voice from the corner. Everyone turned to look. Director Kyung-min stepped into the light. He was a man who looked about 60 but was actually much older, kept alive by the same medical technology that had extended human lifespans. He ran the Outer Darkness Project, a military research program so secret that even most of the council didn't know its full scope. There is a third option. President Ji-won leaned forward. Explain. Kyung-min activated a new holographic display. It showed ships unlike anything in the current Terran fleet. They were black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, and their shapes seemed to hurt the eye to look at directly. For 30 years we have been preparing for exactly this scenario. Not invasion by humans, but by something from beyond our solar system. We built the Dark Armada. Murmurs ran around the room. Dr. Minji, who had been standing quietly in the back, stepped forward. Director, those ships were theoretical. The dark matter reactor technology alone is operational, Kyung-min interrupted. We have 16 vessels fully armed and crewed with volunteers. They are currently stationed in the Kuiper Belt beyond Neptune, where no one has thought to look. What do they do? Daehyun asked. Kyung-min's expression was grim. They weaponize dark matter itself. They can generate gravity wells strong enough to crush ships, create dimensional tiers that unmake matter at the atomic level, and phase in and out of normal space. They are the most destructive weapons humanity has ever created. And the catch? President Ji-won asked, because there was always a catch. The catch is that they're unstable. Each firing degrades the ship's structure. The crews know they may not survive even a single engagement. And if we use them, we announce to the entire galaxy that humanity possesses weapons of mass destruction beyond anything they've seen. We'll be marked as either valuable allies or dangerous enemies. The room fell silent. The weight of the decision pressed down on everyone present. Finally, Counselor Hana spoke. Our ancestors faced extinction many times. Ice ages, plagues, wars that threatened to destroy civilization. And every single time they chose to fight rather than submit. That's what makes us human. That's what has always made us human. General Sang-hoon nodded slowly. If we're going to die, let's die on our feet. One by one the counselors voted. The decision was unanimous. President Ji-won stood and addressed the room, her voice steady and strong. Send a message to the Valaks. Tell them our answer is no, and activate the Dark Armada. Far out in the eyes, though. Kuiper Belt, beyond the orbit of Pluto, 16 black ships received their orders. Admiral Taejin, commanding the flagship Eternal Darkness, read the message twice. Then he turned to his crew, men and women who had volunteered knowing they might never see Earth again. This is it, he said simply. We're going to war. Not for conquest. Not for glory. For survival. For Earth. For humanity. The crews took their positions. The dark matter reactors hummed to life, creating sounds that shouldn't exist in normal space. The ships began to move, accelerating to impossible speeds, leaving trails of distorted space behind them. Earth had sent its answer to the Valak's dominion, and that answer was carried by 16 ships made of darkness and determination, crewed by humans who refused to kneel. The Valaks did not take humanity's refusal well. 48 hours after Earth sent its answer, the alien fleet moved into attack position. They started with the orbital stations first, methodically destroying everything humans had built in space over the past 2 centuries. Sentinel-7, where Ambassador Hyun had first met the aliens, was vaporized in seconds by a beam of coherent energy that burned brighter than the sun. Commander Daehyun watched from the Lunar Command Center as the station disappeared in a flash of light. He had served on Sentinel-7 for 3 years before transferring to military command. He knew every corridor, every crew member. Now it was gone, along with 5,000 people who hadn't even had time to scream. All defense platforms open fire, he ordered, his voice flat and cold. Make them pay for every inch. Earth's orbital defense network activated. Railguns fired solid slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. Missile batteries launched their payloads. Laser arrays focused their beams on the alien ships. For a few moments, space around Earth lit up with human defiance. The Valak shields absorbed everything. The weapons that had been designed to protect Earth from human enemies proved useless against alien technology. One by one, the defense platforms were destroyed. The lunar base shuddered as near misses sent debris raining down onto the surface. "This isn't a battle," Lieutenant Minho said quietly from his position at the tactical console. "It's an execution." "Then we die fighting," Daehyun replied. He opened a channel to the few remaining defense ships in orbit. "All vessels, this is Commander Daehyun. I know it looks hopeless. I know we're outgunned and outmatched. But every second we hold them here is another second for Earth to prepare. Every ship we destroy, even if it costs us 10 of ours, is one less ship that can attack our planet. So fight. Fight until you can't fight anymore. And then fight some more." The response came back from dozens of ships. No words, just acknowledgement signals. They all knew what was being asked of them. They all knew they were going to die. Captain Sunwoo commanded the carrier Soul's Pride, one of Earth's largest warships. Her hull was already scarred from multiple hits, her shields failing, her engines damaged. Half her crew was dead or dying. But her reactor still worked, and she still had control of her ship's navigation. "All remaining crew, this is the captain," Sunwoo said over the internal comm. "Abandon ship. Get to the escape pods now. That's an order." "Sir, we can still fight," his tactical officer began. "I said abandon ship," Sunwoo roared. Then, more softly, "I need you to survive, to tell them what we did here. Now go." As the crew evacuated, Sunwoo locked himself into the captain's chair and took manual control. There was a Valak's dreadnought ahead, its shields shimmering as it fired on the remaining human ships. He could see a gap in the shield coverage where the emitters met, a tiny weak point that normal weapons couldn't exploit. But a carrier massing 50,000 tons moving at maximum velocity could. "For Earth," Sunwoo whispered, and pushed the engines to maximum. The Soul's Pride accelerated like a missile, streaking across space toward the alien dreadnought. The Valaks tried to target it, but they were too slow. The carrier smashed into the shield junction point, and for just a moment the shields failed. That moment was enough. Earth's orbital railgun platforms, the few that were still operational, fired everything they had at the exposed dreadnought. The alien ship's crystalline hull shattered like glass, and the ship broke apart in a brilliant explosion. It was Earth's first kill, and it had cost them their finest carrier and its captain. On Earth, billions watched the battle through whatever screens and networks were still functioning. They saw their defenders dying in space. They saw the alien fleet slowly, methodically destroying everything. And they saw Supreme Overlord Kethras's message broadcast on every channel. "Humans, you see the futility of resistance. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your courage cannot save you. Surrender now and I will spare your cities. Continue fighting, and I will turn your planet into a monument to the price of defiance." President Jiwon appeared on screens worldwide within minutes. She was in an underground bunker somewhere, but she looked calm. Behind her, damage reports scrolled past, showing cities being evacuated and militaries mobilizing for a ground invasion that would never work. "People of Earth," she began, "I will not lie to you. We are facing extinction. The aliens attacking us have destroyed everything we built in space. They are preparing to bombard our cities. Many of you will die in the next few hours." She paused, and something changed in her expression. A hardness entered her eyes. "But we are not surrendering. We are not kneeling. 200,000 years ago, our ancestors were prey animals hiding in caves, terrified of predators with bigger teeth and stronger claws. But we survived. We learned. We fought back. We turned predators into hunting dogs and learned to make fire and weapons. We conquered this planet not because we were the strongest, but because we refused to accept defeat." The broadcast cut to show something new. 16 dark shapes were appearing on long-range sensors coming from deep space. They moved in ways that didn't make sense, flickering in and out of existence, leaving trails of distorted space behind them. "The Valaks think they know war," Jiwon continued. "They think they've seen the worst that intelligent species can do. They're wrong. They're about to learn what humans do when faced with extinction. We don't have mercy. We don't have honor. We have survival. And we will burn down the galaxy before we let them take that from us. The Dark Armada has been activated. May God have mercy on us all." In the Kuiper Belt, Admiral Tajan stood on the bridge of the Eternal Darkness. Around him, his crew worked in controlled chaos. managing systems that shouldn't exist and weapons that violated the laws of physics. The ship hummed with barely contained power, the dark matter reactor creating sounds that made people's teeth ache and their eyes water. "Time to engagement?" Tejan asked. 4 hours at current speed, came the response from navigation. "Sir, the reactor is already showing stress fractures. If we push any harder, we'll get there faster, which is what matters. Maintain current speed." Tejan pulled up the tactical display showing the Valix fleet. There were so many of them. His 16 ships against hundreds. But numbers didn't matter when you were willing to use weapons that killed both the target and the wielder. He activated the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Tejan. You all volunteered for this mission knowing what it meant. You knew we might not come home. You knew these ships are as dangerous to us as to the enemy. But you came anyway because you're human and humans don't kneel." He looked at each face on his bridge crew, young and old from every part of Earth and her colonies, all volunteers, all ready to die. "The Valix sent their fleet to make us submit. We're going to show them that some species can't be conquered, not because we're stronger, but because we'd rather die free than live as slaves. Remember that in the hours ahead. When your ship is breaking apart around you, when the weapons start to fail, when it seems hopeless, remember that Earth is watching. Remember that humanity is counting on us. And remember that we are the Dark Armada, and we do not fail." The crew responded with a roar of approval that echoed through the ship. In Earth orbit, the Valix detected the incoming anomalies. Supreme Overlord Kethris studied the sensor readings with his forearms crossed, his black eyes narrowed in suspicion. "What are those?" he demanded. "Unknown, Overlord," his science officer replied. "They are generating massive gravitational distortions, but our sensors cannot identify their composition or power source. They do not match any known human technology. Send Squadron 7 to investigate and destroy them." 12 Valix warships broke formation and headed out to meet the unknown threat. They were among the Dominion's finest vessels, having participated in the conquest of 20 worlds. Their crews were experienced and confident. They encountered the Dark Armada at the orbit of Mars. The human ships didn't look like ships at all. They looked like tears in space, holes in reality that absorbed all light. They moved impossibly fast, phasing in and out of normal space. And when they fired their weapons, the Valix warships simply ceased to exist. No explosions. No debris. One moment there were 12 proud vessels of the Valix Dominion. The next moment there was nothing but distorted space and radiation that made sensors scream. Back on his command ship, Kethris received the report. Or rather, he received silence. Squadron 7 had stopped transmitting. They were simply gone. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Supreme Overlord Kethris felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. The Dark Armada was coming, and it brought darkness with it. Captain Soyon stood on the bridge of the Nightfall, watching the Valix fleet grow larger on her displays. Her ship was one of the 16 vessels of the Dark Armada, and like all of them, it was dying from the moment it activated its weapons. She could see the cracks forming in the hull through the internal cameras, spreading like spider webs across the black metal. The dark matter reactor was consuming the ship from the inside out, trading longevity for pure destructive power. "Target the command carriers," she ordered. "We need to cut off their coordination first." "Targeting," her weapons officer confirmed. The young man's hands shook slightly as he worked the controls. Everyone on the bridge knew what firing the main cannon meant. Each shot took years off the ship's operational life. After 4 or 5 shots, Nightfall would tear itself apart. Fire. The dark matter cannon didn't fire like a normal weapon. There was no beam of light, no missile launch, no explosion. Instead, space itself seemed to twist and fold. A Valix command carrier suddenly found itself at the center of a gravity well that shouldn't exist. The alien ship's shields tried to compensate, but you can't shield against gravity. The carrier collapsed inward, crushed into a ball of compacted matter no larger than a car, its crew dead before they could even scream. "Target destroyed," the weapons officer reported. "Hull integrity down to 73%. Reactor stability at 68%. "Mark the next target," Soyon said calmly, even as alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Around her, the rest of the Dark Armada engaged the Valix fleet in earnest. It wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. The human ships phased in and out of reality, appearing inside enemy formations, firing weapons that violated physics, then disappearing before the aliens could respond. The Valaks had shields designed to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. They had no defense against weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces of the universe. Admiral Tajan coordinated the assault from his flagship, the Eternal Darkness. His tactical display showed the battlefield in 3 dimensions, with the Valak's fleet marked in red and his 16 ships in black. But even as he watched, one of those black markers flickered and went dark. "The vessel Shadowrunner is gone," Lieutenant Minho reported. "They managed to take out 3 enemy dreadnoughts before their reactor went critical. Mark them as heroes and move on," Tajan said, his voice heavy. "We can mourn later. Right now we fight." The Eternal Darkness fired its main weapon at a cluster of Valak's destroyers. The dimensional shear that resulted literally tore space apart, and the alien ships were ripped into their component atoms. But the cost was immediate. Tajan felt the ship shudder around him, heard the groaning of metal being stressed beyond its limits. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, Damage Control reported. "We've lost the portside reactor shielding. Radiation levels are critical. Seal those decks and keep fighting," Tajan ordered. He knew what that meant. Everyone on those decks was already dead or dying from radiation exposure. But stopping to help them meant the Valaks would destroy the ship and kill everyone aboard. On Earth, Dr. Minji watched the battle through the sensor network. She sat in the underground command center, surrounded by scientists and military personnel, all of them staring at displays that showed a battle unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. "This is insane," someone whispered. "Those weapons are tearing apart space itself." "That's exactly what they were designed to do," Minji said quietly. She had helped develop the theoretical basis for the dark matter reactors, back when they were just equations on a screen. Seeing them used in practice was both amazing and horrifying. Every shot destabilizes local space-time. The effects will persist for decades, maybe centuries. "Can we win?" Commander Daehyun asked. He had come down from the Lunar Command Center after it became clear the conventional battle was over. Minji pulled up projections on her screen. "If we define winning as destroying the Valak's fleet, then yes. Probably. We have enough firepower to eliminate every enemy ship in the system." "And if we define winning as survival?" Minji's expression was grim. 8 of our 16 ships are already critical. By the time the battle is over, we'll be lucky if any of them can make it back to port. The crews knew that. They went anyway. Above the lunar surface, the battle continued. Supreme Overlord Kethris watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy he couldn't even properly target. His crystalline skin had lost its luster, taking on a dull, stressed appearance that indicated fear in his species. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. 73, Overlord. "And the enemy has lost only 4. This is impossible." "They are primitives. How can they have such weapons?" His science officer brought up scans of the human ships. "Overlord, these vessels are weaponizing dark matter. They're using forces that most species consider theoretical and uncontrollable. The energy signatures suggest their ships are literally consuming themselves to power their weapons." Kethris understood then. The humans weren't fighting to win a war. They were fighting to ensure mutual destruction. These were weapons of last resort, built by a species that would rather die than submit. "Pull back," he ordered. "We retreat to the outer system and regroup." But Admiral Tajan had anticipated this. The Dark Armada had positioned itself to cut off escape routes. When the Valak's fleet tried to withdraw, they found human ships waiting for them, emerging from the darkness like demons from ancient human mythology. Captain Soyeon's Nightfall was one of those ships. She appeared directly in the path of a fleeing Valak's battle group, her ship flickering in and out of normal space. The Nightfall was barely holding together now, its hull glowing with radiation, pieces of armor plating flaking off into space. "This is our last shot," her weapons officer said. "After this, the reactor goes critical whether we want it to or not." Soyeon nodded. "Then let's make it count. Target the Overlord's command ship. That's the most heavily shielded vessel in their fleet. Our weapon might not penetrate." "It will," Soyeon said with certainty, "because we're going to fire at point-blank range." She knew what she was saying. Firing the dark matter cannon at point-blank range meant Nightfall would be caught in the blast. There would be no escape, no phasing out to safety. The ship and everyone on it would die. Her crew looked at her. She looked back at them. No words were needed. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not come home. "Navigation, take us in," Soyan ordered.
"Full speed."
"Weapons, prepare to fire on my mark." The Nightfall accelerated toward Supreme Overlord Kethras's command ship. The Valak's vessel was enormous, 3 times the size of any human warship, its crystalline hull gleaming even in the darkness of space. Its shields were at maximum power, and its weapons tracked the approaching human ship. But the Nightfall was moving too fast, phasing in and out of reality, impossible to target accurately. It closed the distance in seconds, emerging from a phase shift less than a kilometer from the alien command ship. "Fire," Soyan commanded. The dark matter cannon fired for the last time. At such close range, even the Overlord's shields were useless. The weapon tore through the crystalline hull like paper, and the entire front half of the ship simply ceased to exist, unmade at the atomic level. Supreme Overlord Kethras died instantly, along with his entire command staff. The Valak ship broke apart, massive sections tumbling through space, and the Nightfall died with it. The backlash from the weapon at such close range overloaded every system simultaneously. The ship broke into pieces, its reactor going critical and creating a brief, brilliant star that could be seen from Earth's surface. Captain Soyan's last thought as her ship came apart around her was that Earth would be safe, that humanity would survive, that her death meant something. On the eternal darkness, Admiral Tajin watched Nightfall's final moments in silence. Then he opened the fleet-wide channel. "The enemy command ship is destroyed. All remaining Valak's vessels, this is Admiral Tajin of the Terran Dark Armada. Your leader is dead. Your fleet is broken. Surrender or be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to decide." The Valak's fleet, leaderless and terrified, chose survival. They began broadcasting surrender signals on all frequencies. The battle for Earth was over. Humanity had won. But Admiral Tajin looked at his tactical display and counted the cost. Of the 16 ships that had launched from the Kuiper Belt, only 7 were still intact enough to accept surrender. 9 vessels and their crews were gone, sacrificed to save the world. "Begin damage control procedures," Tajin ordered. "And send a message to Earth. Tell them we won. Tell them Earth is safe." He didn't add that most of the surviving ships, including his own Eternal Darkness, were so damaged they might never make it home. Some victories came at a price too high to celebrate, but humanity was free, and that was worth any cost. The battle was over, but the dying continued. The Eternal Darkness limped back toward Earth orbit, trailing debris and radiation. Admiral Tajin sat in his command chair, surrounded by damage reports that scrolled endlessly across broken screens. Half his crew was dead. The other half was working desperately to keep the ship from breaking apart completely. "Hull breaches on 12 decks," Lieutenant Minho reported, his voice hoarse from breathing contaminated air. "The reactor containment is failing. We have maybe 6 hours before it goes critical." "Can we reach Earth's orbit in 6 hours?" Tajin asked. "Maybe, if nothing else breaks." Tajin nodded. That was the best they could hope for. He looked at the tactical display, watching the 7 surviving ships of the Dark Armada struggle to return home. Each one was a monument to human determination and human sacrifice, but 2 of those ships would never make it. Even as he watched, the marker for the vessel Black Star went dark. The ship's reactor had failed catastrophically, and the explosion could be seen from Earth's surface, a brief flash of light against the stars. 6 ships now, Tajin said quietly. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them we're coming home. Tell them to prepare medical teams and radiation protocols." He didn't say what everyone was thinking. Most of the crews on these ships had been exposed to lethal doses of radiation. Even if the ships made it back, many of the people aboard them were already dead. Their bodies just didn't know it yet. On Earth, President Jiwan stood on the balcony of the emergency government bunker, looking up at the sky. The battle had been visible even during daylight, bright flashes and streaks of light that shouldn't exist in nature. Now in the aftermath, the sky looked strange, distorted. The dark matter weapons had left scars in space itself, creating aurora-like effects that would persist for generations. Commander Daehyun approached from behind. "Madam President, we're receiving the final casualty reports." "How bad?" she asked, not turning around. 3 billion dead on Earth from the orbital bombardment. Every major city in the northern hemisphere was hit. The Valaks targeted evacuation centers deliberately. Jiwan closed her eyes. 3 billion people, gone in hours. And in space? Every orbital station destroyed. The entire lunar command center is gone, collapsed by direct fire. The Mars colonies lost contact, and we assume they were hit as well. And of the Dark Armada, Daehyun's voice caught. 9 ships and their crews lost in combat. 6 ships returning. But at least 4 of those are so damaged they'll have to be scuttled as soon as their crews evacuate. Total casualties? Military casualties are estimated at 5 million. Civilian casualties at 3 billion and climbing as we discover the full extent of the damage. President Ji-won was silent for a long moment. 3 billion people, an entire generation gone, cities that had stood for thousands of years reduced to radioactive craters. The orbital infrastructure that had taken 2 centuries to build destroyed in hours. But we're still here, she said finally. We're bloodied and broken, but we're still here. Still human, still free. Yes, Madam President. Then we rebuild. Starting now. Dr. Minji worked in a hazmat suit in what used to be Beijing. The city was now a crater 10 kilometers across. The ground fused into glass by the heat of the alien bombardment. Her team was measuring radiation levels and dark matter contamination, trying to determine if the area would ever be habitable again. This is bad, one of her assistants said, looking at the readings. The dark matter from our weapons mixed with the radiation from their bombardment. It's created something new, something we've never seen before. Minji examined the data. The assistant was right. In their desperation to save Earth, humanity had used weapons that poisoned the very space around their planet. It would take decades, maybe centuries, to clean up the contamination. Some areas might never recover. Mark this entire region as uninhabitable for the next 100 years, she ordered, and start collecting samples. We need to understand this if we're going to fix it. She thought about the irony. They had saved Earth from conquest, but in doing so, they had scarred their own planet. Was it worth it? She looked up at the sky, seeing stars that were slightly wrong now, distorted by the weapons humanity had unleashed. Yes, she decided. It was worth it. A damaged Earth where humans were free was better than a pristine Earth where they were slaves. In orbit, the eternal darkness finally reached Earth's space. Admiral Taejin ordered the evacuation immediately. Shuttles and rescue ships swarmed around the dying vessel, pulling off crew members who could still walk and carrying off those who couldn't. Taejin was the last to leave, as tradition demanded. He stood on his bridge one final time, looking at the command chair where he had ordered so many people to their deaths. The ship groaned around him, the reactor containment failing moment by moment. "Sir, we need to go now," Lieutenant Minho said from the shuttle airlock. "The reactor is going critical in 90 seconds. Taejin took one last look around, saluted the empty bridge, and followed his lieutenant to the shuttle. They were barely clear when the eternal darkness exploded, torn apart by its own power source. The ship that had led the Dark Armada to victory became another brief star in Earth's orbit. 3 days later, Admiral Taejin stood in a hospital room, dying of radiation poisoning. He had known from the moment he activated the dark matter reactor that this was how it would end. The exposure had been too severe, too prolonged. The doctors could make him comfortable, but they couldn't save him. President Ji-won visited him personally. She stood by his bedside looking down at the man who had saved Earth at the cost of everything. "The Valak survivors have been contained," she told him. "We're holding them at the lunar prison facility. They keep asking how we did it. How we defeated them. What did you tell them?" Taejin asked, his voice weak. "I told them the truth, that humans don't kneel, that we'd rather burn down the galaxy than submit to conquest, that they chose the wrong species to threaten." Taejin smiled slightly. "Good. Let them tell their people. Let everyone in the galaxy know what happens when you push humans too far." He coughed, a wet rattling sound. Ji-won held his hand. "The other crews?" he asked. "Being treated. Some will survive. Many won't. They're all being awarded the Terran Star, the highest honor we can give. They deserve more than medals. I know. But medals are all I have to give." Taejin was quiet for a moment. Then, "Was it worth it, Madam President? 3 billion dead. An entire fleet lost. The planet scarred for centuries. Was our freedom worth that price?" Ji-won didn't hesitate. "Ask me again in 100 years when Earth has rebuilt and humanity is thriving. Ask me when our children and grandchildren live free under a sky we control. Ask me when the galaxy knows that humans cannot be conquered. Then I'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you now. Yes, it was worth it. It will always be worth it." Admiral Taejin died that night surrounded by his surviving crew. His last words were simply, "For Earth." Around the planet, humanity began the long, painful process of rebuilding. Cities were constructed in new locations away from the contaminated zones. The orbital infrastructure slowly came back online, piece by piece. The wounded were treated, the dead were buried, and life went on. But Earth was changed forever. Not just physically, though the scars in the land and sky were obvious.
Humanity itself was different.
They had faced extinction and refused to bow. They had used weapons so terrible that even their creators feared them. They had sacrificed billions to remain free. And across the galaxy, other species learned what had happened. They learned about the Valix Dominion's failed conquest. They learned about the Dark Armada and its terrible weapons. They learned that there was a species out there that would rather destroy itself than accept defeat. Some species sent messages of congratulations. Others sent warnings that Earth had made itself a target. A few simply sent acknowledgement that humanity existed and should be left alone. Earth's response to all of them was the same message that Ambassador Hyun broadcast on all channels. Humanity seeks peace with all species. We offer trade, cooperation, and friendship. But we also offer this promise: never again will we be threatened with extinction. Never again will we be told to kneel. We have shown what we're capable of when pushed to the edge. Let that be the last time anyone needs that demonstration. The message was heard across dozens of star systems, and every species that heard it understood the same thing. Humans were dangerous, not because they were strong, but because they refused to accept defeat, and that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. 5 years had passed since the war. Earth looked different now, but it was still Earth, still home. General Sang-hoon walked through the memorial park that had been built outside of New Seoul, one of the cities constructed to replace the one destroyed in the bombardment. The park stretched for kilometers, filled with monuments to the fallen. 3 billion names were carved into black stone walls that curved like waves across the landscape. At the center stood a massive sculpture of the 16 ships of the Dark Armada, rendered in dark metal that absorbed light just like the real vessels had. Sang-hoon stopped at one particular section of the wall. His daughter's name was there, along with 50,000 others who had died when the original soul was vaporized. He touched the carved letters gently, remembering her laugh, her determination to become a diplomat like Ambassador Hyun. "I did what I could to save them," he whispered to the stone. "It wasn't enough. I'm sorry." Behind him a voice spoke. "No one could have saved them, General. The Valix wanted to break us, and they chose to break our cities first." Sang-hoon turned to see Commander Daehyun approaching. The younger man looked older now, his hair touched with gray despite his age. Running the Terran Defense Fleet had aged him quickly. "The new fleet is coming along well," Daehyun reported. "We've commissioned 50 new vessels in the past year alone. All conventional technology, no dark matter reactors." "Good," Sang-hoon said. "Those weapons should never be used again." "Agreed. Though Director Kyungmin wants to maintain the research program, he argues we might need them again someday." Sang-hoon shook his head. "The Dark Armada saved us, but it also showed us what we're capable of. That knowledge is dangerous. Sometimes I wonder if we should have just surrendered, accepted slavery, and waited for a chance to rebel later." "You don't really believe that," Daehyun said. "I see you here every week visiting your daughter's memorial. If we had surrendered, her death would have been meaningless. But because we fought, because we won, she died free. That matters, does it?" Sang-hoon asked. 3 billion dead, for what? So the rest of us could remain free? How many lives is freedom worth?" Daehyun was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Ask the Valix prisoners. We offered them a choice last month: stay imprisoned on Earth or return to their empire as free beings. Every single one chose to stay here. They said they would rather live in human prisons than return to the Dominion's perfect order. Freedom matters, General, even to aliens." Dr. Minji stood in front of a classroom at the rebuilt Terran Science Academy, teaching the next generation of physicists. The students were young, most of them born after the war, learning about dark matter theory and why it must never be weaponized again. "The dark matter reactor was a marvel of engineering," she explained, projecting equations onto the screen. "It could generate more power than any fusion reactor, manipulate gravity itself, and tear holes in the fabric of space. It was also the most dangerous technology humanity has ever created." A student raised her hand. "Professor Minji, if it was so dangerous, why did we build it?" "Because we were afraid," Minji answered honestly. "For decades before the Valix arrived, We knew that something might come from deep space. Something we couldn't fight with conventional weapons. So we built the most powerful weapons we could imagine, and we prayed we'd never have to use them. But we did use them. Yes, and we paid a terrible price. The Dark Armada saved Earth, but it also contaminated our own solar system. The Jupiter colonies still can't return to their stations because of residual dark matter radiation. Mars lost a third of its population to contamination poisoning, and Earth itself. Minji pulled up images of the ruined zones. These areas won't be habitable for another 200 years, maybe more. She looked at her students seriously. You are the generation that will have to live with what we did. You'll be the ones cleaning up the contamination, rebuilding the colonies, and ensuring this never happens again. That's why you need to understand this technology completely. Not to use it, but to prevent anyone else from using it. Captain Soyan sat in a wheelchair in the Terran Naval Academy, teaching cadets about void warfare. She had survived the destruction of the Nightfall by pure chance. Her escape pod had been ejected automatically before the ship's final attack, throwing her clear of the explosion. But the radiation exposure had crippled her, leaving her unable to walk without assistance. The Dark Armada fought like no fleet before or since, she told the eager young cadets. We didn't use tactics in any traditional sense. We used terror. We became ghosts in the dark, appearing and disappearing, striking with weapons that couldn't be defended against. Ma'am, was it hard? A young cadet asked. Knowing you might die with every shot? Soyan smiled, though it was a sad smile. It was the easiest decision I ever made. My planet, my species, my family, everything I loved was about to be enslaved or destroyed. Dying to prevent that wasn't hard. Living with the fact that I survived when so many others didn't, that's the hard part. She gestured to the images on the screen behind her, showing the 16 ships of the Dark Armada. These vessels and their crews bought you your freedom. They paid a price you can't imagine. So when you graduate and join the fleet, remember them. Remember that the best warriors are not the ones who seek battle, but the ones willing to die to prevent it. In the rebuilt United Terran Council chambers, President Jiwan prepared to address the galaxy. Earth had been invited to join the Galactic Assembly, a loose coalition of species that governed trade and diplomacy among the stars. This would be humanity's first official interaction with the wider galactic community. Ambassador Hyun stood beside her, reviewing the speech notes. The older woman had become Earth's chief diplomat, responsible for navigating the complex politics of dozens of alien civilizations. They're afraid of us, Hyun said quietly. The other species? They've heard what we did to the Valaks. Some of them think we're dangerous warmongers who should be contained. Are they wrong? Jiwan asked. No, but they're not entirely right either. We're dangerous when threatened, yes, but we're not conquerors. We just want to be left alone to rebuild. Jiwan nodded. Then that's what I'll tell them. An hour later, President Jiwan stood before the Galactic Assembly. Thousands of aliens from dozens of species watched her, some with suspicion, others with curiosity, a few with respect. She took a deep breath and began. Representatives of the Galactic Assembly, I come before you today not as a conqueror, but as a survivor. 5 years ago, the Valaks Dominion attempted to enslave my people. They demanded we kneel, surrender our freedom, and accept subjugation. We refused. She paused, letting that simple statement hang in the air. In the war that followed, 3 billion humans died. Our planet was scarred. Our orbital infrastructure was destroyed. We paid a price that I cannot adequately describe. But we paid it willingly because freedom is not negotiable. A human who is not free is not truly human. Murmurs ran through the assembly. Jiwan continued. I understand that many of you fear us now. You've heard about the Dark Armada and the weapons we deployed. Weapons that violate natural law. Weapons that killed their own crews as surely as they killed the enemy. You're afraid we might use such weapons again. She looked around the chamber, meeting alien eyes of every color and shape. You should be afraid. Not because we want war, but because we've proven we'll do whatever it takes to remain free. The Dark Armada was our last resort. Our final answer to the question of extinction. We would rather destroy ourselves than submit to conquest. That's not a threat, it's a warning, a promise. Leave us alone and you'll find no better friends in the galaxy. Threaten us with extinction, and you'll discover that humans are very good at taking their enemies with them into the dark. She softened her tone slightly. But understand this as well. We don't want war. We want to rebuild our world, explore the stars, trade with other species, and learn from civilizations older and wiser than ours. We offer friendship to anyone who offers it to us. We seek peace, cooperation, and mutual prosperity. Earth's door is open to all peaceful species. Jiwan finished her speech and sat down. The assembly was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, species began to vote on Earth's admission to the Galactic Assembly. The vote was unanimous in favor. Later, Ambassador Hyun found Jiwan in the embassy quarters. You did well. They understood the message. Which message? Jiwan asked. The one about friendship or the one about mutual destruction? Both. That's what makes it effective. You offered them a choice, be our friends or leave us alone. Either option works for us. Jiwan walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the ruins of the Valak's dominion were collapsing into civil war. Their subject species rebelling now that the myth of invincibility was broken. Earth had inadvertently freed dozens of civilizations simply by refusing to be conquered. Do you think we did the right thing? She asked quietly. Hyun didn't hesitate. Yes, we showed the galaxy that some species can't be conquered. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we'd rather die than lose our freedom. That's a lesson worth teaching, even at a terrible price. 50 years later, Earth had fully recovered. The contaminated zones were slowly being reclaimed. The orbital infrastructure was rebuilt.